Tonight, under the glow of our family's 12-foot tree, my sister's diamond necklace sprayed stars across the room while my parents pressed a crinkly plastic grocery bag into my hands. For you. Inside a tangle of takeout soy sauce packets, a chipped snowman mug, and a receipt with my name misspelled. I smiled anyway, because 20 minutes later, in this very house, I was about to call in a set of documents that would change the deed, change the dinner, and change exactly who got to sparkle in this family. My name is Maya Ellison, and I've perfected the art of smiling through insults wrapped in Christmas paper. The dining room at Colonial Hill gleamed like a Pottery Barn catalog mother's doing. Naturally. Crystal stemware caught the candlelight, sending fractals across the mahogany table that had supposedly belonged to some Revolutionary War colonel. The 12-foot Fraser fir dominated the corner, its branches sagging under the weight of 3 decades' worth of collected ornaments, each one with a story that somehow always featured Sloane as the heroine. Maya, darling, could you pass the cranberry sauce? Mother's voice carried that particular pitch she reserved for public performances. The one in the Waterford bowl. Not the never mind. Sloane's got it. Of course she did. Sloane had been getting it since birth valedictorian. Harvard Law, junior partner at Langford and Bly before 35. Tonight, she wore a cashmere dress the color of good wine, her blonde hair twisted into something that probably had a French name. The diamond studs in her ears were last year's triumph. This year, apparently, required something grander. Before we continue dinner, Father announced, tapping his wine glass with the theatrical timing of a man who'd spent 30 years commanding courtrooms. Your mother and I have something special. The mahogany grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7:30 p.m., its brass pendulum catching the light with each swing. I counted the chimes, a childhood habit that helped me stay calm during family gatherings. Father reached beneath his chair and produced a black velvet box that screamed heirloom. Sloane, sweetheart, Mother cooed. This belonged to your great-grandmother Eleanor. She wore it to the governor's inaugural ball in 1924. The necklace was obscene in its beauty Art Deco platinum settings, cradling diamonds that threw light like tiny grenades. Sloane's gasp was perfectly calibrated. Not too surprised she'd probably glimpsed it during one of her authorized raids of Mother's jewelry box, but appreciative enough to warrant the moment. Oh, and there's more, Father added, producing an envelope. The deed transfer paperwork for the lake house. We'll sign it after the holidays. It's time it passed to the next generation of Ellison women who understand. Legacy. Legacy. There it was, the word that had haunted every family dinner since I'd chosen data science over law school, the word that meant tradition, which meant following the predetermined path, which meant being Sloane. And for Maya, Mother said, her voice shifting to that bright, brittle tone that preceded disappointment. We have something practical. You're always so practical. The plastic bag crinkled like distant thunder as she handed it across the table. Stop and Shop logo facing out, handles stretched from weight. Through the thin white plastic, I could make out shapes angular, mismatched, clearly grabbed from various household drawers. Go on, open it, Mother encouraged, though her attention had already drifted back to Sloane, who was holding the necklace up to the light. Inside 3 packets of soy sauce from the Chinese place that closed 2 years ago, their corners sticky with age. A snowman mug with a chip on the handle, I recognized it from the kitchen's donation box. A coupon for 20% off at Bed Bath & Beyond, expired last March. And at the bottom, a receipt from the liquor store. My name spelled Maya in hasty blue pen. We know you're not much for fancy things, Mother explained, not meeting my eyes. And that mug, didn't you always love hot chocolate at Christmas when you were little? When I was 7. I'd loved hot chocolate when I was 7. It's perfect, I said, folding the bag carefully, deliberately. Thank you. My phone vibrated against my thigh, silent mode. Always silent mode at family dinners. I glanced down discreetly. The notification made my pulse quicken. Assignment of mortgage recorded. Winterlight Holdings to Northfield Acquisitions, LLC. Recording fee processed 7:18 p. 12 minutes ago. While they were presenting diamonds and deeds, the Suffolk County Recorder's Office was processing my paperwork. The Christmas lights twinkled on the tree, and I noticed something I'd been cataloging for months, a hairline crack spreading across the ceiling from the northeast corner, right above where the old radiator system connected. The house settling, or maybe something more. The inspection report in my briefcase would clarify that soon enough. "Maya, you're smiling," Sloane observed, her voice tinged with suspicion. "What's funny about a bag of trash?" I looked at my sister, diamond necklace now clasped around her throat, throwing stars across the room with every breath. In exactly 23 minutes, when dessert was served, the doorbell would ring. Not carolers, not Christmas well-wishers. Just the inevitable result of 3 months of careful planning. Every document filed with the precision they'd taught me to despise. "Nothing's funny," I said, raising my water glass in a toast. "To family traditions and to unexpected gifts." The radiator clanged somewhere in the walls, a sound that would cost $30,000 to fix. But they didn't know that yet. Growing up in the Ellison household meant learning to applaud from the shadows. Every dinner was a performance review, and I was perpetually failing to meet metrics I'd never been given. "Tell everyone about your Supreme Court clerkship interview," Mother would prompt Sloane over pot roast, while I pushed peas around my plate. My acceptance letter to MIT's data science program folded in my pocket, unmentioned. The conversation would flow around me like water around a stone. Sloane's achievements, Sloane's connections, Sloane's future. I became fluent in the language of being furniture. The hierarchy was established early. Picture day, 3rd grade. Sloane got the velvet dress with the Peter Pan collar. I got her hand-me-down jumper with a safety pin holding the broken strap. School concerts front row for Sloane's violin solos, back row for my science fair presentations. Even our bedrooms told the story. Sloane's overlooking the garden, mine facing the garage, where Father's BMW started every morning at 6:15 sharp, rattling my windows. But it was the rejection at 23 that carved the deepest mark. I'd spent 6 months building the pitch. The Providence Port Authority was auctioning a small logistics depot abandoned, overlooked, but perfectly positioned for the coming boom in last-mile delivery. I'd run the numbers until they sang projected ROI of 32% within 18 months. 47% if we leveraged the tax incentives I'd identified. The presentation deck was pristine, 27 slides of market analysis, competitor matrices, and financial projections that my MIT professors would have wept over. I presented it in Father's study on a Sunday afternoon in March, dressed in my best suit, hands steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Mother sat in the wingback chair, needle-pointing something with roses. Father behind his desk, fingers steepled like a judge considering a verdict. Even Sloane was there, fresh from her bar exam triumph, texting while I talked. The initial investment would be $400,000, I explained, clicking to the funding slide. "I'm putting in $50,000 from my savings. I'm asking the family trust for a loan of $350,000 at market rate plus 2%. Full repayment within 3 years, backed by the property as collateral." The silence lasted 17 seconds. I counted. Then Father laughed. Not cruel, exactly, but dismissive, the way you'd laugh at a child who announced they wanted to be a dinosaur. "Maya, sweetheart," he said, removing his reading glasses to polish them his tell for delivering bad news. "Real estate development isn't about spreadsheets. It's about relationships, leverage, understanding how the game is played. You don't have the capital, the connections, or frankly, the temperament for this world. But the numbers don't close deals," Sloane interjected, not looking up from her phone. "People do, and no offense, but you're not exactly a people person." Mother's needle pushed through fabric. "Why don't you focus on something more suitable?" "Didn't that tech company offer you a data entry position?" "Data analyst," I corrected, though the distinction was lost on them. "The trust is for serious investments," Father continued. closing my presentation folder without looking at it. Sloan's Law School, for instance. That's an investment in the family's future reputation. This, he gestured vaguely at my carefully prepared materials. This is a gamble on someone who's never proven they can handle real responsibility. The depot sold 3 weeks later to a developer from Boston. Today, it's worth $12 million. That night, I sat in my room facing the garage and made myself a promise. No more asking, no more explaining, no more seeking approval from people who'd already decided my worth. I would build my empire in silence, brick by brick, document by document, until the day came when they couldn't ignore what I'd become. The data entry position, I took it, but I also took evening classes in commercial real estate law. I studied the Uniform Commercial Code like other people studied scripture. I learned about assignments, subordinations, and the beautiful brutality of foreclosure proceedings. I discovered that power wasn't inherited or gifted in velvet boxes. It was hidden in filing cabinets at the county recorder's office, in the fine print of distressed debt portfolios, in the angles others overlooked while they were busy admiring themselves in the mirror. Every slight became fuel, every dismissive laugh, every "Maya's so practical." Every Christmas where Sloan's gifts came in boxes from Tiffany while mine came from Target, each one added another line to the ledger I was keeping. Not for revenge, exactly. For balance. The Ellisons taught me that family meant knowing your place. They were right. They just never imagined I'd choose my own place, and that it would be holding the deed to theirs. Looking back, I should thank them for that Sunday afternoon rejection. Father was right. I didn't have the temperament for his version of the game. I had the temperament for something much more precise. Something that didn't require their approval or their connections or their trust fund. All it required was patience, planning, and a deep understanding of exactly how much debt a colonial mansion in Westbridge could carry before the weight became unsustainable. The world of distressed debt is where math meets blood. Most people see foreclosure notices and think tragedy. I learned to see opportunity. Northfield Acquisitions occupied the 7th floor of a forgettable building in downtown Providence, the kind of place with flickering fluorescents and elevators that groaned like dying animals. But behind the peeling paint and water-stained ceiling tiles, we moved millions. Our business was simple. We bought what others had given up on defaulted mortgages, abandoned commercial leases, judgment lines that original creditors had written off as uncollectible. We paid pennies on the dollar and then did what others couldn't or wouldn't. We fixed the problems. Julian Hart found me at a continuing education seminar on UCC Article 9, taking notes like my life depended on it while attorneys around me checked their phones. He was 53, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen every variation of human financial disaster. Over coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, he asked me one question. Do you understand that money is just a story we tell about value? I did, and he hired me on the spot. First rule, Julian said my first day, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in interconnected circles representing shell companies. We're not vultures. Vultures feed on the dead. We're surgeons. We find what's hemorrhaging and either stop the bleeding or amputate cleanly. The learning curve was vertical. I studied servicing notes, assignment chains, and the beautiful complexity of MERS registrations. I learned that every mortgage had a story origin, transfers, modifications, defaults, and that most servicers couldn't tell you that story if their lives depended on it. That ignorance was our margin. Never go after occupants. Julian taught me. We want paper, not people. Buy the note, negotiate with the borrower, restructure if possible, foreclose if necessary, but always, always leave them better than bankruptcy would. It was ethics as business strategy. Sustainable predation. My specialty became multi-layered commercial instruments, the kind where the original note had been sold 4 times, modified twice, and nobody could figure out who actually owned what. I'd spend 12-hour days tracing ownership chains through SEC filings, county records, and bankruptcy dockets. I built spreadsheets that mapped relationships between LLCs like family trees of money. Within 18 months, I was running my own portfolios. I had a talent for seeing patterns others missed. The strip mall in Cranston, whose anchor tenant was leaving, but had a penalty clause worth more than 3 years of rent. The office building in Warwick, where the ground lease and the mortgage were held by subsidiaries of the same parent company, creating a conflict that could be exploited through careful negotiation. We structured each acquisition through a different entity: Winterlight Holdings, LLC for residential mortgages, Compass Commercial Trust for office buildings, Meridian Asset Recovery for judgment purchases. Clean, separate, legally bulletproof. My personal favorite was Redemption Capital Partners. Julian let me name that one. "You're building something," he observed one evening, finding me still at my desk at 11:45 p.m., surrounded by incorporation documents. "This isn't just about money for you." He was right. Every successful acquisition felt like proving Father wrong. Every restructured loan that kept a business open was evidence that I understood exactly how the game was played, just not their version of it. The real education came from our legal team at Benton Rowe PLLC. They taught me that contracts were weapons and words were ammunition, that the difference between shall and may could be worth millions, that notification requirements, cure periods, and acceleration clauses were the pressure points that could bring giants to their knees. Most people think power comes from what you own, our lead attorney explained during a particularly complex commercial foreclosure, but real power comes from understanding what others owe. I kept learning, kept building. I created a personal database of every distressed asset in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. I knew which banks were eager to clear non-performing loans before quarter end, which servicing companies were sloppy with documentation, which law firms would negotiate and which would fight. But I never forgot my ethics, strange as that sounds. We didn't target individual homeowners struggling with medical bills. We didn't buy student loans or pursue deficiency judgments against people already broken. We focused on commercial properties, investment groups, and especially this would matter later, legacy real estate held by people who could afford to pay but chose not to. Strategic defaulters, we called them. The wealthy playing games with debt while their lawyers bought time. "You have a gift," Julian told me after I'd identified a portfolio of mixed-use properties with clouded titles that we acquired for $2 million and flipped for $8. "You see the chessboard while others are playing checkers." By my 30th birthday, I controlled, through various entities, over $40 million in distressed debt instruments. Not bad for someone without the proper temperament for real estate. The morning I discovered my parents had taken out a HELOC on Colonial Hill to fund Sloane's wedding, a $250,000 affair at the St. Regis that made the Times, I knew it was time. They'd leveraged their kingdom for a party. The note had been sold twice since origination, buried in a bundle of non-performing residential loans that a regional fund was eager to unload before year-end. I bought the entire portfolio for the price of the worst property in it. Buried on page 47 of the assignment documents: Colonial Hill, Westbridge, Rhode Island. Current balance $487,000. Monthly payment $4,200. Months delinquent 0. Not yet. Anyway, the final insult came at Thanksgiving, delivered between the butternut squash soup and the heritage turkey. "Maya's doing something with computers," Sloane announced to her husband's family, waving her hand dismissively. "Data entry, essentially. But someone has to do the boring work, right?" I was sitting 3 feet away, serving myself cranberry sauce from Mother's Spode china. The partners from Langford and Bly and their spouses nodded sympathetically, the way you'd acknowledge someone's chronic illness. "Poor Maya," their eyes said, "the other daughter." "It's actually predictive analytics for distressed asset acquisition," I corrected, though I knew it was pointless. "See?" Sloane laughed, that tinkling sound she'd perfected at Harvard. "She makes it sound so complicated. It's basically Excel spreadsheets." Father chuckled from the head of the table. "Maya's always been our practical one. Not everyone can argue before the Second Circuit like our Sloane did last month." That night, I went home and pulled up everything, every document, every filing, every piece of the puzzle I'd been assembling without conscious intent. Colonial Hill wasn't just leveraged, it was a disaster waiting for a trigger. The HELOC was adjustable rate, tied to prime plus 3%. They'd been paying interest only for 2 years. The loan would reset in 4 months, jumping their payment from $4,200 to $6,800 monthly. The property insurance had gaps. Flood coverage had been dropped to save money, despite being in a 100-year floodplain. The heating system, that clanging monument to deferred maintenance, violated current code. One inspection and they'd face $30,000 in mandatory repairs. But it was Sloane's firm that gave me the final piece. Langford and Bly had just signed a 5-year lease for satellite office space in Providence. The building owned by Greystone Commercial Holdings, a portfolio I'd been tracking for months. Distressed seller, needed quick cash, willing to take 70 cents on the dollar for the right buyer. I called Julian at 11:30 p.m. I need to set up something special, I said. Clean, but complex. Multiple layers. How special are we talking? Family special. There was a pause. Julian had rules about mixing business with personal, but he also knew me well enough to know I didn't make calls like this lightly. Come by tomorrow. Bring coffee. The good stuff. Operation Winterlight. I named it after the way ice crystals form on windows. Beautiful and Inevitable required 7 separate entities and 4 law firms to maintain ethical walls. Winterlight Holdings LLC would acquire Colonial Hill's note through a series of assignments. Market rate, all legal, the kind of transaction that happened 1,000 times a day in America. Northfield Commercial Trust would purchase the Greystone building, becoming Langford and Bly's landlord. Hidden in the lease assignment, a clause requiring tenant law firms to provide 200 hours of pro bono services annually to qualifying nonprofits. Standard corporate social responsibility language that nobody ever enforced, unless they needed to. Redemption Capital Partners would establish the Winterlight Foundation, a 501c3 focused on financial literacy for women, particularly women who'd been economically marginalized by family systems. The irony was intentional. The evidence gathering was almost too easy. Screenshots of Sloane's social media, watching my sister pretend to understand cryptocurrency at dinner, adorable father's email to a colleague, forwarded by a sympathetic secretary. Maya's reliable enough, but she lacks the sophistication for complex transactions. Mother's text to Sloane, accidentally sent to the family group chat. Should we invite Maya to the symphony gala? She'll probably wear that unfortunate pantsuit again. Each insult, documented. Each dismissal, filed. Not for emotional reasons for leverage. Courts love patterns of behavior. You're not going to destroy them, Julian said, reviewing the structure. It wasn't a question. Destroy them. No. I'm going to do what they did to me, show them their place in the family hierarchy. Only this time, I'm writing the org chart. The timeline was precise. December 24th, papers would be filed. December 24th, notifications would be delivered. December 24th, while they sat around their mahogany table distributing heirlooms and condescension, I would redistribute power. The fire inspector, Julian asked, reading my checklist. Scheduled for 7:50 p.m. Anonymous tip about a gas smell. He'll have to check the heating system. The violations he'll find are real. I'm not fabricating anything, just accelerating discovery. And if they fight, I pulled out the contingency folder. Alternative strategies, each one progressively more aggressive. The nuclear option, father's judicial decisions involving property law. 3 cases where his relationships with developers could be questioned. I wouldn't use it probably, but having it meant I wouldn't need to. They won't fight, I said. They'll negotiate. It's what sophisticated people do. Julian smiled, the expression of a man who'd taught his student too well. You know what I love about this. You're using their own playbook. Every move is something they'd applaud if Sloane did it. That was the point. To win their game so completely that they'd have to acknowledge I'd been playing all along. Not from the shadows, from a different board entirely. One where their pieces had been mine from the moment they'd leveraged their kingdom for a party. The letter to the fire department was already sent. The assignments were processing. The foundation paperwork was filed. In 4 weeks, The practical daughter would become the powerful one. And that plastic bag of trash they'd given me, I'd have it framed. The papers moved through the system like water finding cracks in stone, each filing, each signature, each notarized document another fissure in the foundation of Colonial Hill. December 15th, 9:23 a.m. Suffolk County Recorder's Office confirmed the assignment. The mortgage on Colonial Hill transferred from Bridgewater Fund 4 to Winterlight Holdings LLC. Price $112,000 for a note with a balance of $487,000. The clerk who processed it didn't blink. These transactions were invisible, boring, beneath notice, just paper changing hands. December 16th, 2:45 p.m. Greystone Commercial Holdings accepted our offer. $42 million for the entire portfolio, including the Providence Building housing Langford and Bly's satellite office. The seller was so relieved they threw in the furniture. Sloane's corner office now technically contained my chairs. December 18th, 4 p.m. The lease modification documents arrived at Langford and Bly, buried in a stack of year-end renewals. Paragraph 47, subsection C. Tenant agrees to provide minimum 200 hours annual pro bono legal services to qualified nonprofit organizations as designated by landlord. Standard CSR language. The signing attorney probably didn't even read it. December 19th, 11:30 a.m. Father called. Maya, your mother wants to know if you're bringing anyone to Christmas dinner. Just myself. Good. Sloane's partners from the firm will be there. Try to, well, be yourself. But maybe not too much yourself. I smiled at my phone. I'll be exactly myself. Dad. December 20th, 3:15 p.m. The Winterlight Foundation received its 501c3 determination letter. Expedited processing it pays to know which examiner just went through a divorce and needs the overtime. Our mission statement, providing financial literacy and economic empowerment to women systematically excluded from family wealth structures. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. December 21st, 10 a.m. Julian reviewed the final package with me in his office. 3 manila envelopes, each one a different future. Envelope A, he said, holding it up like evidence. Notification of default prevention requirements, the code violations, insurance gaps, and a 30-day cure period. Completely standard, fully compliant with state law. Envelope B, the restructuring offer. Northfield finances all repairs, freezes the interest rate, extends the term. In exchange, they sign the recognition letter acknowledging past financial discrimination, commit to supporting the foundation, and donate the diamonds to our fundraising auction. Envelope C, the nuclear option, acceleration of the full balance, notice of foreclosure proceedings, and, he pulled out a paper, this memo about conflicts of interest in 3 of Father's property law decisions, which we won't use. Probably won't use, I corrected. December 22nd, 8:45 p.m. Benton Rowe PLLC delivered their opinion letter. Every element of the transaction was legally bulletproof. No conflicts, no violations, no grounds for challenge. Frankly, the senior partner wrote, this is cleaner than most bank foreclosures we review. December 23rd, noon. The fire marshal's office confirmed the inspection appointment. December 24th, 7:50 p.m. They'd received multiple reports of gas odors in the Colonial Hill neighborhood. Standard safety check, nothing unusual. December 23rd, 3 p.m. Mother called. Maya, dear, what are you bringing tomorrow? Documents. I'm sorry. Wine. I meant wine. Oh, well, nothing too expensive. You know how Sloane's colleagues are about wine. Very particular. December 23rd, 11:59 p.m. I sat in my apartment, everything ready. The envelopes were in my briefcase, the contracts were signed, the chess pieces were positioned. Tomorrow, the practical daughter would teach her family a lesson about power that it doesn't announce itself with diamonds or proclamations. It arrives in manila envelopes, in paragraph 47, In the fine print they'd never bothered to read because they assumed I couldn't write it. My phone buzzed. Julian, still time to reconsider. I texted back. They had 32 years to reconsider. Another text, this time from an unknown number. I opened it, a photo from Sloane's Instagram, posted an hour ago. Her hand wearing the heirloom necklace. Caption, early Christmas gift. Some families pass down jewelry. Others pass down. Data entry skills. Blessed, not stressed. Elysian heirloom. She'd spelled our name wrong. Ellison with an O, not Elysian with an I. Even in her cruelty, she couldn't be bothered with accuracy. I pulled out envelope B, added a sticky note to the recognition letter section. Spelling counts in legal documents. It's Ellison, with an O. Like the deed you won't be getting. The fire inspector would ring the doorbell in 19 hours and 50 minutes. The turkey would still be warm. The diamonds would still be glittering. And I would be smiling, genuinely this time, as I placed 3 envelopes on the mahogany table that had supposedly belonged to a Revolutionary War colonel. Revolution, it turns out, can be inherited after all. Just not the way they expected. The grandfather clock struck 7:45 p.m. as Mother carried in the Christmas pudding, flames dancing on its surface like tiny blue spirits. The dining room was a staged perfection, candles reflected in crystal, the diamond necklace at Sloane's throat catching light with every breath. Father presiding over his table like a benevolent king. Before dessert, Father announced, raising his glass of 30-year port, a toast to family, to traditions maintained, legacies honored, and the next generation carrying forward what we've built. Everyone lifted their glasses. Mine contained water. I needed clarity for what came next. The doorbell rang at 7:50 p.m. Exactly. Who could that be? Mother frowned, her hand moving protectively to her pearls. On Christmas Eve. I'll get it, I said, already rising. No. Father stood, his judge's instinct for authority kicking in. I'll handle this. We all listened to his footsteps in the foyer, the murmur of male voices, the rustle of official papers. When he returned, his face had shifted from confused to concerned. Fire inspector, he announced. Apparently someone reported a gas smell. He needs to check the heating system. Tonight, Sloane's husband, William, looked skeptical. On Christmas Eve. Gas leaks don't observe holidays, the inspector said, appearing in the doorway, youngish, earnest, clipboard in hand. I'll be quick. Just need to access the basement and check your heating system. Mother's carefully orchestrated evening began to fray. The inspector's boots left traces of snow on her Persian runner. His radio crackled with dispatch calls. The basement door's opening let in a draft that made the candles flicker. 20 minutes. That's all it took for him to return with a face that said he'd found exactly what I knew he would. Mr. Ellison, we need to discuss some code violations. Nothing immediately dangerous, but you'll need to address them within 30 days. 30 days? Father's courtroom voice emerged. That's absurd. It's Christmas. The violations are dated from your last inspection override 18 months ago. Technically, you're already in grace period extension. The inspector handed over his preliminary report. Heat exchanger has stress fractures. Ventilation doesn't meet current code. You'll need a licensed contractor to file remediation plans with our office. As Father studied the papers, his jaw tightening, I reached into my purse and withdrew 3 envelopes. While we're discussing the house, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. We should probably address the mortgage situation. The room went silent. Even the inspector sensed the shift, muttering something about waiting outside. What mortgage situation? Mother asked, though her voice carried a tremor that said she already suspected. I placed the first envelope on the table, exactly where my plastic bag had sat earlier. Envelope a notice of mortgage acquisition and default prevention requirements. Winterlight Holdings LLC now owns your note. The payment resets in 3 months to $6,800 monthly. With the code violations and insurance gaps, You're looking at approximately $90,000 due within 90 days. What the hell are you talking about? Sloane stood, her diamond necklace swaying. You can't, I can, I did, it's all legal. I placed the second envelope down. Envelope BA restructuring offer. Northfield Acquisitions will cover all repairs, freeze the interest rate, even reduce the principal. Very generous terms. In exchange for what? Father's voice was deadly quiet. Your signature on this recognition letter? I pulled out the document, holding it up so the candlelight illuminated the words. A simple acknowledgement that this family systematically undervalued and excluded me from opportunities afforded to Sloane, that you denied me business loans while funding her every venture, that you treated me as the practical one code for lesser. This is extortion, Sloane hissed. This is business. Your firm should know they do it every day. I turned to her. Speaking of which, did you know your satellite office lease contains a pro bono provision 200 hours annually, designated by the landlord? That would be me now. Mother's hand shook as she reached for her wine. Maya, this is cruel. Cruel. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the screenshots. Let me read some cruelty. Maya's reliable enough, but lacks sophistication. That's Dad. Watching my sister pretend to understand cryptocurrency. Adorable. That's Sloane. Should we invite Maya? She'll probably wear that unfortunate pantsuit again. That's you. Mom. Each quote landed like a slap. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Envelope C, I said, placing the final packet on the table, is what happens if you refuse. Acceleration of the full note balance. Foreclosure proceedings begin January 2nd. And this, I pulled out a single sheet, is a memo regarding potential conflicts of interest in several of Father's property law decisions, which would be such a shame to become public during Sloane's partnership review. You wouldn't, Father said, but uncertainty cracked his voice. I'm practical. Remember, I do what needs to be done. The grandfather clock ticked through 30 seconds of silence. The pudding's flames had died, leaving only the ghost of brandy in the air. Sloane's diamond necklace caught the light one more time, throwing tiny stars across the wall, stars that suddenly seemed cold and distant. You want us to give up the necklace, Mother whispered, her fingers moving to her throat as if she could already feel the diamonds being lifted away. I want you to donate it to the Winterlight Foundation's auction. The proceeds will fund financial literacy programs for young women whose families didn't believe in their potential. William cleared his throat. Sloane, maybe we should… Don't. Sloane's voice could have frozen champagne. This is my sister having a breakdown. She can't actually… Your sister, I interrupted, standing now, matching her height in my unfortunate pantsuit. Controls your mortgage, your office lease, and enough leverage to crater your career. What I'm having is Christmas dinner. What you're having is a choice. The fire inspector knocked. Mr. Ellison, I need you to sign the violation notice. Father looked between the inspector and me, understanding dawning in his eyes. Every detail had been orchestrated, every moment planned. How long? He asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? I thought of that Sunday afternoon at 23, my beautiful pitch deck dismissed without a glance. 9 years of building in silence while they celebrated Sloane's every achievement. Long enough, I said. Sign the letter, donate the diamonds, and keep your house. Or don't, and lose everything. It's 8:25 p.m. The notary I've arranged leaves at 9. Sloane's phone rang at 8:32 p.m. The name on the screen, Marcus Steinberg, senior partner at Langford and Bly. She answered on speaker, a tactical error that would cost her. Sloane, I apologize for calling on Christmas Eve, but I just received an urgent notification about our Providence office lease. Something about a pro bono obligation and a landlord named Papers rustled through the phone. Northfield Commercial Trust. Do you know anything about this? Every face turned to me. I remained perfectly still, hands folded on the mahogany table. It's a misunderstanding, Sloane said, her voice pitched too high. I'll handle it after the holidays. The notice says we're already in breach, 200 hours annually, effective immediately. The penalty clause is, Jesus Christ, it's triple rent for non-compliance. Sloan, what is going on? I'll call you back. She hung up, her face flushed beneath her perfect makeup. You bought our building. $42 million for the entire portfolio. Your office furniture is technically mine now. I'm particularly fond of your Herman Miller chair. William, who'd been silent until now, pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. She's right. I just pulled the property records. Transfer recorded December 16th. You're supposed to be on my side, Sloan snapped at her husband. I'm on the side of not losing our house, he replied, showing her his screen. This is all legally airtight. Maya owns your mortgage, your office building, and apparently has enough documentation to destroy your father's reputation. Father stood slowly, the way he used to rise when delivering a verdict. You want to humiliate us? No. I met his eyes steadily. I want you to see me. For once in 32 years, I want you to see me as something other than furniture in Sloane's spotlight. This is about jealousy. Mother's voice cracked. We gave you everything. You gave me leftovers. The words came out sharper than intended. Hand-me-downs, forgotten birthdays, a plastic bag of garbage while you draped diamonds on Sloane. You gave me just enough to survive, but never enough to thrive. You're successful now, Father argued. You clearly have money. I have power, I corrected. There's a difference. Money is what you gave Sloane. Power is what I took for myself. The notary arrived at 8:45 p.m., a middle-aged woman who'd given up Christmas Eve for triple overtime. She sat up at the side table, stamps and seals arranged with practiced efficiency. We need our lawyer, Sloane said, pulling out her phone. Call them. I gestured to her cell. It's Christmas Eve. Even if someone answers, they'll need days to review everything. Meanwhile, the 30-day clock is ticking on those code violations. The insurance gaps need immediate attention, and Marcus Steinberg seems very concerned about that lease violation. Sloane dialed. No answer. She tried another number. Voicemail. A third. The junior associate who answered sounded drunk from a holiday party. Tick-tock, I said softly. 8:52 p.m. Father picked up envelope B, reading the restructuring terms carefully, his judge's mind working through each clause, looking for the trap. But there wasn't one, not in the traditional sense. The trap was that the terms were generous. Too generous to refuse without looking foolish. The recognition letter, he said slowly. You want us to admit, in writing, that we treated you unfairly, that you treated me as lesser, that you denied me opportunities, that you systematically devalued my contributions to this family. And if we sign, I'll reduce the principal by 30%, finance all repairs at 0 interest, freeze the payment at current levels for 5 years. You keep your house, your dignity, and most of your wealth. Most. The diamonds go to charity, and Sloane fulfills her pro bono obligations. I'm thinking foreclosure defense for single mothers might be appropriately educational. Mother stood and walked to the window, staring out at the snow beginning to fall. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Ruth was my grandmother's name. That necklace was hers. And it will raise approximately $80,000 for women who were never given heirlooms, never given anything but plastic bags. You're enjoying this, Sloane accused. I'm completing a transaction. Enjoyment is irrelevant. But that was a lie. I was enjoying it. Every second of watching their world tilt, of seeing them scramble for lawyers who wouldn't answer, of listening to that grandfather clock count down their options. 5 minutes, the notary announced. I have another appointment at 10. Mother turned from the window. Daniel, sign it. Everyone looked at her in shock. Ruth. Father started. Sign it. Her voice carried an authority I'd rarely heard. She's right. We did this. We treated our daughter like she was worth less than the other. We gave her scraps and wondered why she didn't thrive. We made our bed. Now we lie in it. She walked to Sloane, reaching for the clasp of the diamond necklace. "Take it off." "Mother, no. Take it off." Mother's hands were steady as she undid the clasp herself, the diamonds catching the light one last time before she placed them in their velvet box. "It's just carbon arranged prettily. Both our daughters are worth more than pretty arrangements." She handed me the box. "The letter. Where do I sign?" I pointed to the signature line, watching as she wrote her name in the careful script that had signed 1,000 charity invitations, thank you cards, and dismissals of my achievements. Father followed, his signature heavy with resignation. Then came the terms, the restructuring agreement, the donation pledge, each signature a small surrender. Sloane was last. She stood before the notary, pen shaking in her hand. "I could still fight this," she said to me. "I know people. I have resources." "You have a husband who's already calculating how to minimize the damage," I replied, nodding toward William, who was texting frantically. "You have a senior partner wondering about lease violations. You have parents who just admitted, in writing, that they failed one daughter to elevate another. What exactly are you fighting for?" She signed with such force the pen tore through to the second copy. 8:59 p.m., the notary announced, finalizing the documents with her seal. "Congratulations on your transaction." The notary packed her stamps with practiced efficiency, the sound of her briefcase closing like a final verdict. 9:03 p. on the grandfather clock. The dining room felt smaller somehow, as if the weight of signed documents had compressed the air itself. "It's done," Father said, his voice hollow. He looked older suddenly, the kind of aging that happens in moments rather than years. "You've won." This wasn't about winning. I picked up the velvet box containing the diamonds, feeling their weight not just in carats but in generations of women who'd worn them to celebrate other women's diminishment. This was about balance. Sloane stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor Mother polished religiously. "I need air." "Sit down," Mother commanded, and surprisingly, Sloane obeyed. "We're going to finish this properly." She walked to the sideboard where the coffee service waited sterling silver, naturally, and began pouring with steady hands. "Maya, you've made your point. The question now is what comes next." "What comes next is January 2nd, I replied, accepting the coffee she offered the first time she'd served me in years. "Julian Hart from my office will contact you about the repair schedule. The work will be done by licensed contractors, all permits pulled properly. The house will be safer and worth more when it's complete." "And Sloane's pro bono work?" William asked, ever practical. "She'll receive a list of cases on Monday. Single mothers facing foreclosure, mostly. Women who got plastic bags while their ex-husbands kept the diamonds." I looked directly at my sister. "You're a good lawyer, Sloane. Time to prove you're also a good person." "I won't forget this," she said quietly. "Neither will I." I pulled out the plastic Stop and Shop bag from my purse. Yes, I'd brought it and placed it on the table in front of her. A souvenir, to remember the night you learned that data entry can be quite sophisticated when properly structured. The fire inspector knocked on the door. "Mr. Ellison, I'm leaving the full report. You have 30 days for initial compliance, 90 for complete remediation." Father accepted the papers like a man receiving a diagnosis. After the inspector left, he turned to me. "You orchestrated everything, even the timing." 7 months of planning, I admitted. Every document, every filing, every phone call calculated for maximum impact with minimum illegality. "Why tonight?" Mother asked. "Why Christmas?" "Because Christmas is when you show people what they're worth to you. You showed me with a plastic bag. I showed you with manila envelopes." I stood, gathering my coat the good wool one I'd bought myself, not the hand-me-down from Sloane's closet. "The diamond auction is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Appropriate. Don't you think a day about love, using stones that were never given with love, to fund love for women who were never loved enough?" "You're leaving." Mother seemed surprised. My business here is concluded. I picked up the signed documents, sliding them into my briefcase with the same care Father used to organize his judicial opinions. Oh, one more thing. The Winterlight Foundation needs a board. I'm saving a seat for you. Mother, you're good at charity work. Time to do some that matters. I walked toward the door, then stopped at the threshold of the dining room. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the corner, casting shadows that made the room look like a stage set, which, in a way, it had always been. You know what the ironic part is, I said, not turning around. If you'd given me just one genuine moment of recognition, one real acknowledgement that I mattered as much as Sloan, I would have given you everything. The loans, the connections, the leverage I've built. I would have shared it all. But you couldn't see past your own reflection long enough to notice there were 2 daughters in this family. Maya, Father started. Merry Christmas. I cut him off, finally turning to face them one last time. Enjoy dessert. I heard the pudding is exceptional this year. Everything else certainly has been. I walked through the foyer, past the portraits of stern-faced ancestors who'd built this fortune on their own exclusions and hierarchies. The front door opened onto a world transformed by snow, everything clean and white and possible. Behind me, I heard Sloane's voice, muffled but clear. She planned this for 7 months. Longer. Mother replied. I think she's been planning this her whole life. I smiled as I stepped into the snow, breath clouding in the cold December air. The weight of the diamonds in my briefcase felt like justice. The signed documents felt like freedom, and the plastic bag I'd left with Sloan that felt like the perfect ending to a story that had started with garbage and ended with gold. My phone buzzed. Julian. How did it go? I texted back. Exactly as planned. Every document signed by 9:03 p.m. And how do you feel? I thought about it as I walked to my car, a Tesla, paid in cash, that they'd never even known I owned. Like I finally exist, I replied. The snow continued to fall as I drove away from Colonial Hill, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just another house with too much mortgage and not enough heart. In February, those diamonds would raise money for women who'd been denied their shine. In January, Sloan would learn what it felt like to serve people who'd been served injustice. And somewhere in between, maybe my family would learn to see both their daughters. But that was their journey. Mine was already complete the moment they signed those papers, the moment they admitted what I'd always known I was never lesser. I was just waiting for the right moment to prove it. The grandfather clock would strike midnight soon, marking the end of Christmas Eve and the beginning of something new. But I wouldn't hear it. I was already gone, driving toward a future I'd built myself, one document at a time. Thank you for listening to this story of family, revenge, and redemption. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Did Maya go too far, or did her family get what they deserved? Let me know what you think.